What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is part of a series where I focus on a specific composer and give you guys those 10 scores that are personally my favorite from said composer. You clicked on the video, so you know this time around I'm doing my top 10 favorite Jerry Goldsmith film scores. The Jerry Goldsmith was a composer that is very well known. In fact, you'll probably see many films on this list that you've seen before, and you might not be as familiar with him as, some other composers such as like John Williams, as Hans Zimmer, but he's done quite a bit of scores. And he's just one of those composers where, looking at his filmography, he definitely had an effect in regards to me personally as a film viewer. So I wanted to talk about some of the scores that, I quite liked from him. But there will be one honorable mention, and then I'll go from 10 to 1, with one being, of course, my personal favorite score from Jerry Goldsmith. Now, it goes without saying, but I know I have to say it every time, this is not an objective list. This is a subjective list, meaning that your list will be different from mine in regards to your top 10 favorite Jerry Goldsmith film scores. And that's what's great about film as an art form, is that it is subjective, not objective. So I look forward to seeing your top 10 list in the comment section down below. But guys, enough exposition. Let's get started. So the only honorable mention that I have is the score for Patton. I think that his score for Patton is quite good. I do believe it got an Oscar nomination, so the Academy clearly likes the score as well. But yeah, it's a good score. It works really well with the film, and that's why I have it as an honorable mention. And now we get to the nitty-gritty, top 10, guys. So my number 10, we have Gremlins. Classic score. The theme song in particular is just really, really good, and I think it works well with the imagery that's on screen. And yeah, it's quite a good score, and that's why I have it as my number 10. Next up, my number 9, we have Hoosiers. This is a film that I saw recently, and by recently I mean within the last couple weeks, and the score is really good. In fact, that's one of the aspects that I will remember about the movie. The movie itself is fine for sure, but the score really elevated many sequences, especially during like the montages and everything. So it's a good score, and I do believe it got an Oscar-nominated score for this film, so it makes sense because it is a good score, and yeah, that's why I have it as my number 9. Next up, my number 8, I do believe he won the Oscar for Best Score for this film. And my number 8, we have The Omen, which is a film that came out in 1976. And I'm not going to lie, I'm glad that I rewatched this film last year because the first Omen came out. And the first Omen I kind of felt, meh about. So I decided to rewatch the original. And when I rewatched the original, I was like, oh, wow, this score was really good. Because prior to last year, I hadn't seen the original in like 9 years, so it had been quite a bit. So now that it's fresh in my mind, it's like, yeah, this score it's quite iconic. It's one of the best horror scores for sure. And yeah, I have it high up on this list for that reason. I think it's very effective, especially in the context of the film itself. So The Omen is my number 8. Next up, my number 7, we have Mulan. This is a 1998 animated movie done by Disney, and I grew up watching this movie, and watching the movie, the score was something that always came to mind when I was watching the movie. It's very much so an epic, sprawling feel to it. It feels very emotional with a lot of the beats that are going on in the story. It works really well. I think that it is one of his best scores, and that's clearly why I have it so high up at my number 7. Next up, my number 6, this is more of a silly entry, but I really like the score quite a bit. I've listened to the score on its own several times. My number 6, we have Gremlins 2, The New Batch. Love the movie. The movie itself is great, but the score is so zany. It has this like Looney Tunes feel to it that I think is really cool. You can tell Jerry Goldsmith had a lot of fun doing this score, and I had a lot of fun listening to it, and especially with how this film is throwing everything but the kitchen sink at you as viewers, it's also fitting that the audio does the same thing, and Jerry Goldsmith is more than up to the task, and yeah, it's quite an effective score. That's why I have it as my number 6. Next up, my number 5, we have Planet of the Apes, 1968. So I've only seen this film one time, and I saw it 7 years ago, but you know something? I think it was a great film, but I think what's more great is the score. The score is very intense. Like, I'll listen to it occasionally. I'm like, whoa, this is really, really intense. It's really good, though. And I think especially when you watch it in the context of the film, it's like, elevates a lot of scenes. It elevates that intensity, especially the ending scene. It really comes full circle. So, one of his best scores, clearly, and that's why I have it as my number 5. Next up, my number 4, we have Alien. Yeah, one of the best sci-fi films of all time, and also just so happens to be one of my favorite Jerry Goldsmith scores. The opening track, that really gets audiences into the mood. It's not just the imagery that gets audiences, it's the score. I mean, this is an iconic score for a reason, and it's because it really fits the tone, it fits the mood that Ridley Scott was going for. And I just think that it might be my favorite score in regards to the Alien franchise, and it was the one that started it all. So there has yet to be a score that kind of matched this, but again, it's still a franchise that, for the most part, I do enjoy. But it all started with this one, and this is, a great score. And that's why I have it as my number 4. Next up, my number 3. Even though, again, this is a list that's specifically just talking about the scores. Even though I like Alien more than my number 3, my number 3 from a score standpoint, I like more. And my number 3, we have Total Recall. I love this score. It is exciting, it's fresh, it's adventurous, and it just works so well with especially the action scenes. And I blind bought this film on 4K for like $10. And I remember as soon as the film began and the score, came into the sound mix, I was like, okay, I'm so glad I blind bought this because I think I'm going to love this film. And sure enough, I did. And a lot of that is owed to Jerry Goldsmith's bombastic score. It's really, really good. And that's why I have it as my number 3. Next up, we get into the top 2. And I'm just going to be honest with you guys. This really depends on my mood. Depends on the day in regards to what my number 1 or 2 is, because these two scores I listen to quite a bit. I love them both, but on this day, which is, I forgot to mention, February 1st, 2025, I decided to go with my number 2 being LA Confidential. Fantastic film, but why it's so fantastic, besides all the other filmmaking aspects such as the cinematography, production design, makeup, comes down to the score. It is very engaging. It is very exciting, it's very tense when need be, and I think that it just elevates a lot of scenes. Really, really good. I dare say perfect score. Love this score. So that was my number 2. Next up, my number 1. You probably guessed it. My number 1, we have Chinatown. Chinatown and LA Confidential, they are 2 of my favorite films of all time, and a lot of that comes down to the score is just so effective for both, as well as the cinematography and production design. But going back to that score, Chinatown's score is one of those scores where it's interesting how romantic sounding it can be at times. I think that the romantic tracks are very, very good, but then when need be, it really does build tension in a way that feels foreboding, where we know something is coming up, but we don't exactly know what. And a lot of that comes down to, again, Jerry Goldsmith, the way that he composes the score. Phenomenal score. Truly phenomenal, and that's why I have it as my number 1. But yeah, guys, overall, I like Jerry Goldsmith as a composer. I think that he was, I don't want to say underappreciated because he did get a bunch of Oscars, but I feel like nowadays people just don't seem to talk about him as a composer, which is a shame. But who knows? Maybe this list will get some of you guys to check out his films, or at least, at the very least, his scores, because again, really, really good composer. But yeah, that is my top 10 favorite Jerry Goldsmith film scores. Let me know yours in the comment section down below. If you haven't done so already, be sure to follow me on Patreon, Letterboxd, subscription, notification bell, and I will catch you guys later.